Hey, how's it going, guys? Go ahead and forgive the mess. This is the extra bedroom at the house. This is officially the cat's room. As you can see, there's some cat toys over there. This video here, I just decided that I was just going to take a random sampling of the tools that I have. I mean, I have quite a few, but I wanted to kind of pull out some of the more interesting ones I have and maybe do like a mini review on each one. So I'm going to start over here. This is a Ryobi, and by that I mean Ryobi battery powered glue gun. This thing's actually really good. It's pretty doggone handy, you know, for doing crafts or minor repair work. I've gotten a lot of use out of this thing. I've had it for maybe a year now, and it hasn't let me down yet. This is actually a really, really, really nice tool. So if you ever need a glue gun and are willing to invest in the Ryobi battery platform, something to consider. All right, this guy here, it's got a little bit of wear and tear on it. This is a glue trowel. I haven't had to use this thing in a while, but you know, back when I used to do a lot of flooring, doing vinyl composite tile, that sort of thing, back when I used to work for that company where we did the grocery store remodels and new buildings, I used to try this. It wasn't this specific trowel. This is actually a newer one than I used to use back then, but you see the little notches there. That's when you scrape it across, and it leaves the correct amount of glue on the ground. And you got a straight edge on this side and that side. If you need to scrape the glue off and correct a mistake. I haven't really gotten much use out of this one. It's still fairly new and in pretty good shape. This is a pull saw, Japanese style pull saw. I mean, it's an Irwin, but it's actually pretty decent quality. So what this thing is used for, if you look at it, the blade's really flexible. You got a fine tooth side and you've got a coarse tooth side. So what this is really handy for is if you've got, like, say, a door or something low to the ground that you need to trim, or up against something you need to trim, you can hold it like this and you pull towards yourself to cut. So say you got an old house that's settled and you got a door that won't close because this door's kind of crooked like that. You can take this and run this across the bottom of the door and shave off whatever's extra. This is a pretty handy tool. I've had this thing for a long time. I mean, I haven't used it very many times, but the few times I've needed it, I've really needed it. So, but yeah, that's called a pull saw. Oh. This is a sheet metal scoring tool. That used to be magnetic, but this thing's been dropped so many times and it's so old it's not magnetic anymore. And it's got a couple of different measurements on it. You know, 1/2 inch mark, 5/8, 3/4, 7/8, 1 inch, and there's a 3/8 mark up here. But depending on how you orient this thing, like say you want to, getting some bad glare, like this 7/8 mark right here. So say you wanted to do a 7/8 mark, you would put the edge of the material right here where my thumb is, kick this up and angle it that way so that edge right there would score it, and that'll give you a 7/8 mark. This thing will also mark on wood, but it's meant for sheet metal. This is a sheet metal worker's tool or a tin knocker's tool. I've gotten a lot of use out of this thing, and it's super fast if you just need to make quick measurements. And they're cheap too. Oh, this big old Irwin wrench. I've always preferred the push button style locking jaws. This particular one I haven't gotten a whole lot of use out of. You can see it looks like it's still in pretty good shape, but this big wrench is pretty handy. I have several other ones of various sizes of this style. Knipex makes I believe Knipex had a patent on this style for a long time and it ran out. So Irwin started making a copy of it. The teeth aren't as good, but the actual locking mechanism's more or less the same thing. I mean, some guys like these, some don't. I personally really like them. Let's do the power tools last. So this is my spackle knife, or my sheet for putting on joint compound. They come in a couple, there's two different styles. They got the one that's like this, and you got the one that's more squared off. It kind of comes at an angle. I prefer this style because they're more flexible. And the way I was taught to hold this thing up high with two fingers like that. Sometimes, and depending on the angle you're trying to hold it at, sometimes the thumb this way, sometimes the thumb this way. That way, when you're mudding, you can kind of put English on it, and that's how you get the perfect feather coat. It takes a lot of practice to get that, to know how to do that though. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but I sharpen this thing religiously. That edge is razor sharp. I could hurt somebody with this. But it's good to have that sharp, and you want it to have no oops. You don't want to have any imperfections on this edge. Otherwise, you'll leave streaks whenever you are applying the mud. A couple of cat toys. Let's see. This is a rigid tool. Obviously, it's red and it says rigid on it. This is I think they call it a PTE cutter or something like that, but it's meant for cutting tubular plastic. This front part here, that's for 1.5 inches, and the smaller inside part's for 1.25 inches, so, which is nice. So if you have a double-ended 1.5 inch tailpiece, you just squeeze that trigger, snap it in, and let go. With this, you can't, on the 1.25 inch side, you can't trim double-ended pieces with that, unfortunately. And you got like a little sight line right there, so if you want to put a mark, you can kind of see my finger through there on the tailpiece. That way you can kind of line it up. I haven't used it a whole lot, but it's a neat thing. The nicest thing about it is when you make a cut with this on your tubular plastic, it leaves a nice smooth beveled edge. Very nice clean cut. Well, since we're talking about rigid, this is a rigid model 108, I believe. This is a self-tightening cutter. I mean, you can manually tighten it too, but somehow or another, this mechanism here, as you apply torque to it, it actually will work its way down and tighten itself up over time. But this handle is a ratcheting handle, which is pretty neat. Or if you want to, you can pull that switch down right there and pull this thing out, which I can't seem to do one-handed, but that's okay. That gives you multiple options. You can either use this as a close quarters cutter, or you can use it as a constant swing style cutter, or something with a long handle on it, if you want speed, or if you want to be able to really crank down on this thing and really get it tight before you start trying to cut. This is a pretty neat tool. I've had this one. I've had this ratchet for quite a while, maybe 4 or 5 years. I think this is a new cutter though. I don't think I've had this cutter more than a year or two. The other one wore out, so I replaced it. The self-feed mechanism wore out on it, so I used it so dang much. I like this tool though. That's one of the best cutters I've ever owned as far as copper. Oh, so this is a reed. I forget the part number. But this thing has a PVC cutting blade on it. You push this button here. So it's got a quick lock, and if you just put pressure on the quick close, and then once you get it to that point, you turn the handle to do finer adjustments. This thing cuts the ever-living crap out of foam core. This thing is really fast. Now, I was kind of skeptical at first. This thing was kind of expensive, but once I got my hands on it and tried it for a while, I prefer this over a saw, because one, your cuts are perfectly straight, and two, you don't have to have a power tool. I can submerge this in water, it won't hurt it, as long as I let it dry out so it doesn't rust. I don't have to worry about a battery going dead. As long as I've got room to actually swing it, this is perfect. I really like this thing. And when I bought it, I also bought this. I believe this is a DEB4. Yeah. DEB4. This is also a reed. It's a PVC chamfering tool. This will do 4-inch, 3-inch, 2-inch, 1.5 inch, and 1.25 inch, I think. I think it says on the back. Yeah. Alright, so chamfering, if you look at the pipe, when you cut it normally like with a saw or something, it'll be like a square. It'll be square shaped. When you cut it with this, it'll have a slight taper to it, because that does kind of crush the pipe a little bit, at least if it's foam core. It'll have a very, very slight taper to it. With this, you put a pretty solid taper on it. Now, if you ever go out and read your manufacturer guidelines on these pipe and fittings, or if you dig into the code book, if you read hard enough, you'll notice that there's a whole lot of mention of shall chamfer pipe, must chamfer pipe. You're supposed to do this. And I swear I think I'm the only plumber within 1,000 miles that bothers to do it. But what happens if you don't, that sharp edge on that pipe, when you push it into the fitting, see the fittings are tapered. They're what's called an interference fit. They get tighter the farther you push the pipe in. So if you're pushing up against a taper and you got a flat edge like this, so that flat edge is hitting and getting tighter and tighter on that taper, all your solvent cement on that edge, you're scooping it out as you push the pipe into the fitting. But if you got a proper chamfer on there, you don't do that. So you get a much, much stronger solvent weld. And that's another terminology thing too to think about. You're not gluing it. You're not gluing anything. You're solvent welding. Solvent welding. I might do a video on just how to solvent weld at some point, but you're supposed to do this. Okay, it takes seconds and it makes a significantly stronger joint. I chamfer all pipe. Any pipe I put in, I always chamfer it. We'll talk about these guys. M12 hacksaw. This is the brushed model. I don't really care for the brushless version of this tool. The brushed model is cheaper and it's a little bit smaller and a little bit lighter. The main difference between the two, besides the brushed versus brushless motor, is the length of stroke on this thing is, I believe this one is 5/8, whereas the brushless model is 7/8. But I actually prefer the 5/8 because, one, it doesn't vibrate as much when you're cutting. It cuts slower, but it's a much smoother cut. But one neat thing about both of those tools, the M12 versions at least, if you put a 6-inch blade in this thing, you can cut 4-inch pipe with it. If you put a 4-inch blade in it, you can cut 2-inch pipe with it. So you don't have to use, like cutting 4-inch pipe with, say, a full-size saw that has a 1-inch stroke on it. You know, you have to put longer blades in to cut smaller pieces of pipe. So it's pretty nice for that. This is maybe the third one of these I've owned, I think. Yeah. They don't like water very much. Don't submerge them. They don't like that. I've killed a couple of them because of that. My PVC shear, it's got some dirt on it. I haven't cleaned it lately. I've used this thing a lot. I don't have a battery in it. Oh, I can open the blade. There we go. You can see the blade. I don't know if you can tell or not, but I have sharpened it a couple of times. It is extremely sharp right now. That's something I kind of take pride in, is being able to sharpen things. This is a really handy thing. It's good for rough-in work. It's good for if you got a lot of small diameter PVC to cut. This is the one to use, or even large diameter PEX, like 1-inch PEX. If I got a bunch of 1-inch PEX I need to cut up for some reason, I'm using this guy just to save my hands. This will cut Schedule 80 2-inch. Okay, I don't think it was rated. I don't think it's rated for it, but it will do it. I've absolutely cut 8 Schedule 80 with this. Set that to the side. Last two. Team Yellow for a second. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at things, almost all of my power tools are DeWalt. That's what I started with. That's what I've used for a long, long time. This is long before I worked for Ruland and even longer before Ruland sold Milwaukee. So I'm not replacing perfectly good tools. So this is a screw gun. If you ever hear anybody talk about a screw gun, this is what they're talking about. You don't hold it like this. This is wrong. This is not working. That's not how this works. You hold it up high like that. And there's a switch. I can't reach it with one hand, but that where my pinky is, that's a hold on switch. So you can squeeze the trigger, turn that on with your main hand, and you can just kind of ride up and hold it. And you'll hold the gun like that. And the reason why you do that, that way you're straight in line when you drive your screws. And this attachment here, I don't know if you can hear that. You can see that bit moving. Inside this mechanism here is it's basically a clutch. When you apply pressure to this driving head and push that down, it engages right there, and it applies torque to it. So when you adjust the setting on this thing, that's your depth adjustment. See how it's poking out farther? That'll drive the screw a lot deeper. So you can use that to control your depth. And I've got a coilated screw attachment, which is like a little, it's yellow because it's the wall, but it's a big thing about this long. And you can attach belts of screws to it. That way you can just, once you get your depth set, you can turn the power on and leave the drill running, so it's always running. It just goes zip, 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 real nice and fast. This style of screw gun, or this style of drill driver, whatever you want to call it, is what I learned on the very first serious construction job I had. I ran one of these for hours on end. Okay. And so if you ever get the chance to see me in action, you'll notice, most people, when they hold an impact gun, an impact driver like this, or a drill driver, whatever, they usually do like this, which is fine, I guess. I mean, it's probably the way it's intended to be held, but I tend to do like this. I use my middle finger for the trigger, index finger's up high right here, and my thumb's either riding on the back like this, or it's riding up high like that. So I choke up on it, and the reason why is just it feels more natural to me because of all the years of doing it the other way. So if you do like this and you start really pressing down, it kind of feels like you're going to cantilever your arm out this way. But holding it this way, or even coming up high enough where I can hit the trigger with that finger, I feel like I can bear down harder and straighter that way. But this is all in a matter of how you want to do it. But that's how I typically hold a tool like that. This particular one's a 3-speed model. I think Milwaukee has a similar model. But yeah, this is some of the more interesting things I have in my collection. I mean, I could do a 2-hour-long video if I were to go through and show you every single tool I have, but I'm not going to do all that. I'm kind of a tool nut. There's not a whole lot out there I haven't heard of. So if you ever hear of an odd question or hear of a strange tool, reach out to me. I'm curious. I'd like to hear about it. And there is a cat in here with me. Hey, what you doing, fatty? Come here. No, you just gonna ignore me and do your own thing? Okay. Well, anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Maybe you learned something, maybe you didn't, but I enjoyed it because this is something I love. I love tools. I've invested a lot of money in this sort of stuff. So, but anyway, if you run across anything weird or anything interesting or have any questions, just let me know.